Americans days as a global leader in numbers.
The issue of anti-Semitism in America today is serious enough that it should capture the attention of all political leaders of both parties.
Rallying around the social media hashtag #ShowUpForShabbat, started by the American Jewish Committee.
Germany banned all Hezbollah activity and designated the Iran-backed group a terrorist organization.
Convening as a global forum reflects the strong ties between Israel and the AJC global community. AJC has always stood by Israel.
We need the clear moral voice of the American Jewish Committee. You have fought for the core values that drive democracies.
This is part of our Staatsräson, meaning the national interests of my home country. The security of Israel and the Jewish people are not negotiable to us.
History has just been made here at the AJC Global Forum.
And I want to announce the launch of the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relationships.
American Jewish Committee declared that Jews cannot ensure equality for themselves until and unless it is assured for all.
Welcome to the AJC Westchester Fairfield Jewish Film Series in partnership with the Stanford JCC. Thank you to our donors who sponsored AJC's films and made these discussions possible. Today's event allows you to engage with AJC, American Jewish Committee's global expertise, content, and advocacy from wherever you are. AJC is the leading global Jewish advocacy organization. With more than 70 offices and partnerships worldwide, AJC is there, combating anti-Semitism and hate, standing up for Israel, and defending democratic values for all. To learn more, please go to westchester@ajc.org. Today, we are honored to be joined by esteemed leaders in the civil rights movement and ongoing important partnerships in Black-Jewish relations. We are joined today by Sherry Rogers, director of the film Shared Legacies, Mort Lowenthal, chair of Stanford's Human Rights Commission at the time of the civil rights movement, will also join us briefly at the beginning of today's session. We will then feature an in-depth discussion between our moderator today, Dov Wilker, director of AJC's Atlanta Regional Office and AJC's Black-Jewish Relations, together with Reverend Dr. Michael G. Christie of the Stanford Union Baptist Church, and Sherry Frank, former director of AJC Atlanta and currently president of NCJW Atlanta. After the conversation, we will take audience questions. You may email your questions to westchester@ajc.org or use the Q&A feature. We will first have some introductory remarks from AJC Stanford's Nancy Schiffman. Nancy?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. The Jewish Film Festival of Fairfield County, presented by the Stanford JCC, is thrilled to be partnering with AJC Westchester Fairfield. The festival has a long history of bringing current award-winning films to the Fairfield and Westchester County community. When it became clear that convening in person would likely not be an option for this season, we quickly pivoted to a virtual festival. And because of a wonderful dedicated festival committee, co-chaired by Jennifer Kaufman, Debbie Lee, and Lisa Popper, all of whom I'm deeply grateful to, the show does indeed go on. We have many impactful films available for viewing. For festival and film details, or to register or become a sponsor, please visit our website. During these challenging times when all we crave is community and being together, we are grateful to be creating community here. Thank you for being a part of that. The JCC serves community in so many ways and continually seeks to respond to the needs that arise. Even though we may not be able to be together in person, it's through virtual programs like the Jewish Film Festival, our book and author series, online fitness classes, as well as in-person programs that enable us to continue to be connected. I'd like to express my sincerest appreciation to our sponsors whose generosity makes community possible. I'd like to especially thank the Friedman family and Garden Homes Management for their continuous support of the Jewish Film Festival. And we're deeply blessed to be partnering with AJC Westchester Fairfield, AJC's long history of being a powerful voice and global leader in advocating for the well-being of the Jewish people in Israel and advancing human rights and democratic values in the United States and around the world, ensures that our festival film conversations will be rich in content and depth and enable us to hear from esteemed experts. This week's festival film, Shared Legacy, directed by Shari Rogers, about the African-American and Jewish relationship during the Civil Rights Movement through today, is a timely and relevant film. As social justice is so rooted in our Jewish values and heritage, as well as in our JCC mission and vision, the Stanford JCC has been developing a social action committee to provide education and facilitate discussion in the greater Stanford community regarding systemic racism, inequalities, bias, and other issues around social justice, with the goal of creating positive and permanent change. If you're interested in being part of this important work, there's a JCC Social Action Committee meeting on Tuesday, November 10th at 7 p.m. You can email me for more information. I'd like to also thank our community sponsor, the United Jewish Federation of Greater Stanford, New Canaan, and Darien, and JCRC, whose work regarding social justice is of great value. If you haven't yet seen the film Shared Legacy, it's available now until midnight tonight. And if you know someone who would enjoy it, please let them know that they can still register. We're deeply grateful and honored to have such distinguished and accomplished speakers join us today for this vital conversation. And thank you for making it a priority and joining us.
Thank you, Nancy. Dove, the floor is yours for Reverend Dr. Christy, Mort Lowenthal, Shari Rogers, and Sherry Frank.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Nancy, for that wonderful introduction. It is always a pleasure to be able to participate in a film festival, be it the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival or the Westchester Jewish Film Festival or any of the festivals across the country where this movie is being screened right now. So let's first start with Dr. Shari Rogers, who's the director of the film. And Sherry, I'm wondering, since the film premiered in February, how has the film been received and where have you seen its greatest impact been?
Well, thank you all for organizing all this. And I'm just so honored, truly honored. And AJC has really just been at the forefront of Black-Jewish relations historically and continue to be. So I'm just honored for their support and for the support of your film festival. But what's exciting is that in these difficult times during COVID, the film is being seen virtually from state to state. And what usually might have been just primarily a Jewish film festival has really opened up to the community. So we have churches involved and we have Black film festivals involved, the NAACP, and it's really exciting because the film becomes a platform to have very courageous conversations of where do we go from here. And what's really exciting is even recently in North Carolina, there was a professor who moderated the film festival and he's bringing the film into their history department. So as we move forward, I'm just so grateful for all of you and I look forward to a really wonderful discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherry. And I should add that if you have any additional interest in the film, be sure to check out Spill the Honey Foundation, which I believe is the the group that is also organizing many other opportunities and conversations related to the film. Is that right, Sherry? Oh, you're muted.
I'm the president of the Spill the Honey Foundation, which is using arts and creating films to educate on the civil rights movement and the Holocaust. And we're working on webinars in college campuses. We're working with Morehouse and different campuses, and we've got young college students carrying this message forward. So it's very important, and we are even creating a curriculum to support this film and more of the film footage that you don't see, because there's so much there that we can only grab splices to really have our impact in the film. But I'm sure you'll want to get to hear more of Sherry Frank and Congressman Lewis and Dove and many more. So we look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Sherry. Now, Mort, for you, much of the film is related to experiences in the Jim Crow South. Can you tell us what it was like to be the chair of the Stanford Human Rights Commission at the time of the Civil Rights Movement, and what type of discrimination you might have faced as a result of that? Oh, don't forget to unmute yourself. Try for the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Maybe just hit the microphone button. Just go from red to green. All right, we're gonna keep you on while once you figure out how to.
Okay.
I think I got
Excellent.
it.
Can you hear me?
Great job.
She did it.
It was at the top of the screen.
Oh, sorry.
We didn't have the Jim Crow laws here, obviously.
Obviously.
There was discrimination against Blacks in housing, jobs, and education. Although Stanford had a Human Rights Commission as early as 1964, its powers and areas of oversight were very limited. In 1969, Julius Walensky became mayor. He was the first and only Jewish mayor of Stanford. The Human Rights Commission was given a lot more authority and jurisdiction. I was appointed chair, and for the first time, a Black man, Woodrow Glover, became the executive director. Let me talk about discrimination in housing, jobs, education, and also police community relations. Housing by far was the biggest issue. 50% of the complaints we received were about housing. Most low-income people lived in old, deteriorated frame housing, and speculators and slumlords were abusing Black and white tenants. The Black population in Stanford had almost doubled in the 60s due to migration from the South. In 1970, Blacks were about 17% of the Stanford population. There was a desperate need for more low-income housing for them. Plus, discrimination prevented Blacks from moving into white areas. We helped address individual problems, and we also focused on new housing developments and encouraged integrated Black and white tenancy. Repeated meetings with the Board of Realtors was also important, so that Blacks could buy homes in any area they could afford. The next biggest area in discrimination, and this is the big one, was jobs. With 19% of the complaints, unemployment and underemployment for minority groups was a major problem. The commission handled individual complaints alleging discrimination in hiring, firing, wages, promotions, layoffs. The commission also surveyed and then highlighted how few Blacks were employed in jobs requiring higher education or training. Finally, we worked with municipal and private employers to encourage equal opportunity to emphasize affirmative action and to promote training and apprenticeship programs. Although education was a continuing problem throughout Connecticut, Stamford took the initiative very early to deal with it. 3 elementary schools in Stamford, Weill, Rice, and Stevens, which were downtown and almost all Black, were closed. The city appointed a group to study the problem and make recommendations. Within 3 years, the city had built 2 new elementary schools around town, closed Weill, Rice, and Stevens, and instituted citywide busing so that all schools have a diverse population. Stamford still has citywide busing, and all our schools are fully integrated, which is quite a situation. Finally, police community relations were not easy because the police were the face of all the problems in the ghetto that the city had not addressed, problems that the police did not cause. Training for police community relations was critical. Generally, though, the number of complaints about the police were not significant. The Police and Human Rights Commission indeed worked together. I remember in 1969, there were 2 nights of rioting in downtown Stamford. Troublemakers were picked up by the police and then taken in private cars to a city warehouse, which we had suggested. In the morning, they were returned to their communities. There were no charges, and against them, no records were kept. So I think we had really made some progress that way.
Excellent. Well, Mort, thank you very much for that fascinating history. It's really, you know, especially being originally from New Jersey, but now living in Atlanta, it's always incredible to learn about the impressive steps that were taken across the United States, and especially in the Northeast. So now I would like to turn it over to our other panelists, Sherry Frank and Reverend Dr. Michael, to respond specifically to the film. So as we begin, I'll start first with Sherry, since you're unmuted. Sherry, perhaps you could introduce yourself as it relates to the film and share your impressions of the film as well.
Thank you, and I'm pleased to be on the panel. First of all, I saw the film the opening night of the film festival, and I think the adrenaline was so high that I didn't take it all in. And so I watched it again last night, and it's really, really a fabulous film. My DNA is Black Jewish relations. I've just been involved in it pretty much my whole life, from driving people to the polls when Andy Young ran for Congress. But at the American Jewish Committee, I helped form the Atlanta Black Jewish Coalition and partnered with Congressman John Lewis, who truly over the decades became my brother, my soulmate. But when I met Sherry Rogers and she told me she was going to make a film, I really played a role with her in setting up a lot of the appointments that are in the film with a lot of the Atlanta folks, and also from the beginning gained a tremendous amount of emotional support and financial support from the American Jewish Committee for the making of the film. So proud of the connection.
Great. And Reverend Dr. Michael, please share a little bit about yourself and how we're so fortunate to have you a part of the film, and also your impressions, of the program, and a little bit about your impressions of the film. Oh, don't forget to unmute.
Thank you for that warning. Reminder. Thank you. It is an honor to be here. And so I'm Reverend Dr. Michael Christie. I'm one of the pastors at Union Baptist Church. Dr. Perry is the senior pastor, has lived through many of these experiences that were in the film. And so I have been lately, particularly since George Floyd and the unrest in our country, been doing some work with Temple Bethel and other synagogues across the state. And so it's been a baptism for me. When much of the civil rights was going on, I wasn't born a part of it. And I was just absolutely touched. I teared up several times throughout the film, Sherry. It was really a profound and powerful documentary. And I was really moved by it and filled with a lot of gratitude to my Jewish colleagues and friends for their participation in the struggle, in the early struggle, and also mourn the sadness of how that fell apart during the movement as well. And so, if anyone hasn't seen the film, I highly recommend it. It reminds me of the film 13, which kind of documents a brief history of Black experience in America. And this documentary was really profound. I was really impressed by all of the people that spoke, by the narrative and how it was interwoven. And I learned a tremendous amount about how involved my Jewish friends and brothers and sisters were in the struggle in so many different levels. And so I have a great sense of appreciation for that. And the film really helped me to do that, to reconnect rather with that. So that
Wonderful. So a follow-up question for you. You know, documentaries notoriously have hours and hours of footage, and Sherry Rogers mentioned it. There was a lot of stuff that they weren't able to include in the film. So I'm wondering if there was something from your perspective that you wish had been included in the film that wasn't.
You know, Dr. Sherry, I want to thank you for the work that you've done with this. I don't know if there's anything else. It was so rich and full. It would be greedy to want to ask for more than that was already there. It was really well done and had wow. I can't at this moment. I really can't think of anything that was missing in terms of communicating what the film communicated. Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, for Sherry? Was there something? I mean, you mentioned how involved you were in the helping to coordinate some of the interviews, and you watched the film multiple times. I mean, was there something that you felt was missing from the film, or that you not something you wish had been included that was on the cutting room floor?
You know, I kept telling Sherry, gosh, interview Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker, interview Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and talk to Rabbi Berg and Reverend Warnock more, because history is wonderful and important, but because I'm so passionate about the issue, I'm so excited there are people carrying on the work, the next generation, and a great deal of it is from Congress, but I mean, even now it's, after the fact, but the fact that the American Jewish Committee and Urban League did a whole week on unity, the kind of interaction that young groups are doing, Access, the American Jewish Committee's young leadership group, interacting with other Black young leadership groups. I just wish there was more time to let people know it's not just past history, but it's really present dialogue. But, as Sherry said, this does spur courageous conversations, and that's helpful.
Well, so Sherry, let's sort of follow up on that. When you think about sort of the young professionals, young leadership, I mean, they've always been, younger people have always been involved in the film, but how can this film be used today? I mean, the focus of the film really was on the civil rights movement, even though it interspersed some scenes of modern day topics. But in your perspective, and also I should say in your experience, what are ways that the film can be used today?
Well, I think, for one thing, currently this amount of anti-Semitism and racism that exists calls on us to work together. I've always said, if the country isn't safe for Jews, it won't be safe for African Americans. And if it's not safe for African Americans, it won't be safe for Jews. So, that's number one. The other thing is we're dealing in this world of COVID where we see the disparity in health. And when Jews are polled about the most important issues to them, health is one of the top issues, and goodness knows it's a top issue for the African Americans. So I think the whole array of social justice issues call on us to work together. And we saw it in the streets of the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. I mean, people of all races and religions were there. And I think we see them in the lines in the polls today and voting. So I think there's a present danger and a present call to action.
Fair. Reverend Michael, I think of the line from the film on a similar line. It says, once a culture is enslaved, you may leave that, but it never leaves you. And there's actually a psychological study that said how trauma is embedded in our DNA and influences the way that we behave, even generations and centuries after the trauma might have existed. So how does that influence the nature of Black-Jewish relations today? How does the film sort of help to influence the nature of Black-Jewish relations today? And even adding a third element to it, you started off by introducing yourself and much of your connections to the Jewish community related to the protest movement after George Floyd. How does all of that coalesce for you in our community today?
Thanks, Doug. So I hear maybe about 4 or 5 questions. So
I think there might have been 6 or 7 in there, to be brutally honest. You only have to answer one of them.
So the quote you made regarding relating to trauma, I think is profound and an important one, and one that is not really paid attention to much. I think part of what has happened for both the shared reality that Jews and Black have is this profound sense of history of trauma, right? Being traumatized with the violence, with slavery, with the Holocaust, with this constant, it seems like, threat hanging over our head to be traumatized. And that does finds its way into our nervous system, into our bodies. And I think we have to pay attention to that from both the Jewish perspective and the Black perspective. There's a profound healing that will come when we really start to acknowledge that wow, that mattered, that there's a historical trauma that is affecting us. And I think one of the things I loved about this film and appreciate it really lays the table for us to sit together and to connect and even to reconnect, because our stories are so similar. We really have this shared story, and we really have this sense, as so often was mentioned in the film, that the Exodus story, right? The Black community is very, particularly in the civil rights era, is very connected to the Exodus movement, right? Very connected to the Exodus theology, so much so as the Jewish is, and we have so much similarity in our struggle and in our journey, and we're so much better when we're together, working together, and so. I think that's one of the ways that this film could be used to kind of reignite that conversation and become a platform for us to reconnect once again and to start back this really powerful alliance that we've had in the history. So I think it was Rabbi Prince, when he was speaking in the March of Washington, mentioned his time in Germany, and he said the sadness was, it was painful enough to have hatred and bigotry, but he said the worst thing, the most shameful stuff, was the silence that the good people, right, were sitting by idle and silence. And so I think as we come together, as Sherry mentioned, the recent protests, people from all walks of lives have really seen something about, we have a shared humanity. There's something about, we are all human beings. Can we get in touch with that and not be so divided? But can we also not be silent and sit on the side and protect our own interests? Because the truth is, as you said, Sherry, what happens to Black when hate and police brutality, when the river of that thing flows in our community, it won't be long before that it will spill the banks and reach to yours. And so it's important for us to be in collaboration together and to walk this thing together.
Reverend Michael, a follow-up question to that. When Mort was talking about the work of the Stanford Human Rights Commission, he mentioned housing, education, and policing as 3 issues that they addressed. I'm wondering, are those issues that the Black community is still facing today? Are they different? If so, are they the same? Are they different? How have they changed? One of the things that I always find so interesting is sort of gaining a much bigger picture of issues that obviously racism is an issue that the Black community still faces. Anti-Semitism is still an issue that the Jewish community faces. But what are some of those and the other day when we had a preparation call for this, you were actually, I believe that you were out at a prison because part of your work is with the prison ministry. So I'm wondering, what are some of those issues that you're addressing today, and is there Jewish involvement in responding to those issues from your perspective?
So we are actually starting with the prison point. I just had Rabbi Praver, who is one of the rabbis we have with the Department of Correction, appealing for more Jewish involvement in the prison, especially around the high holidays. And so would love to have any kind of collaboration around that across the state to support him in that way. Regarding the 3 section that Mort mentioned earlier in the presentation, I believe that structural racism is a cancer in America, and it's not a cancer, it's not localized, it is systemic. So it touches every aspect of life for Black people: education, healthcare, housing, criminal justice, employment, you financing, you name it. There's not a place in American life that racism and structural racism haven't impacted us in a profound and significant way. So we just, some folks are just energized to pay attention to certain areas, or you pay attention to the areas that you think you can make an influence and make a difference in. But everywhere, right? You name it. Our families, schooling, it's just everywhere. It's overwhelming. That's part of the trauma of it as well. It's just so overwhelming that there is no space to breathe, really, because it's just everywhere, really trying to choke the life out of you if you allow it. Yeah.
Sherry, please.
Yeah,
you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I'm anxious to jump in on that. One of the hats I wear proudly is president of the National Council of Jewish Women. And our priority issues are an amazing bridge for Black Jewish cooperation. One of our top issues is reproductive justice. And we've worked in Atlanta with a number of Black groups on the whole issue of maternal and infant health care, which is a major issue. And it's not just abortion, but the whole area of reproductive justice. Another priority of ours is voting rights. I mean, what better issue for Blacks and Jews to coalesce on? The third priority of ours is the courts. And we're all going to be suffering for decades for some of the injustices now with the kind of inadequate folks on the courts, and they're there for life. So I've found, in a lot of advocacy I've been doing in the last 18 months, boy, I'm working with Stacey Abrams groups and with ACLU and with the NAACP and all of the Planned Parenthood, but all of these groups are feminist organizations that are bringing Blacks and Jews and folks of all ethnicities to the table.
Yeah, I think it's such an important comment that you make. It's not limited really necessarily to one issue, right? There's many issues, and there's opportunity for engagement in both. I know for American Jewish Committee, we help to facilitate the creation of the Congressional Caucus on Black Jewish Relations, really as a way to respond to rising anti-Semitism, to rising and openness of racism and bigotry in society. So there's lots of different avenues for us to be able to play that role. I'd now like to turn it over to audience questions. I always have more, but I know that we always like to hear directly from the audience. So I'm gonna ask Myra as the moderator to present the first question from the audience.
Thank you, Dov. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Michael Christie. This conversation can certainly go on for hours, given the importance and the richness of our histories together and the work that we need to continue to do together. We have a number of questions from our audience. So we'll begin with the first one, which comes from Monica, who asks, the film stops in 1970 and takes up again in 2020. So Monica asks if there will be another film to discuss the period not addressed. If anyone knows the answer to that.
What I would say is, I think this film in particular was really focused on, as you mentioned, the civil rights movement. I happen to, as AJC's director for Black Jewish Relations, I've been contacted by a number of people who are interested in making films about different periods of time that reflect Black Jewish relations. Sherry Frank was instrumental in the creation, as she mentioned, of the Atlanta Black Jewish Coalition, which was created in 1982 in response to the renewal of the Voting Rights Act. There are, lots of issues, both good and bad in the 90s and the 2000s. So I'm not sure of other feature-length films, but I'm certain that there are a number of films that are looking to address, by the way, pre-civil rights movement. There was a wonderful film that might have been showed at this film festival probably 5 or 6 years ago called Rosenwald. It was a documentary about Julius Rosenwald and the creation of Rosenwald schools in the South. So, and we might, be fortunate because of social media that a lot of little films can take place to demonstrate Black-Jewish relations, in Connecticut and in Chicago and in Atlanta and in Los Angeles. I mean, everybody has their own story. And as you heard Reverend Michael say earlier, he's got a personal story in Connecticut, and Sherry's got her personal story in Atlanta, and really across the country, there are these personal stories for us to consider. So Sherry Rogers might have to answer specifically about her film, but I know that there's a lot of others that are, stay tuned to your local film festival.
Thank you, Dov. AJC Westchester Fairfield board member Jerry Silber asks, what do you feel is the current status of Black-Jewish relations?
Either Sherry or Michael, please feel free to respond to that.
Well, I'm an optimist. I always see the glass full. So I think the demonstrations in the street tell you the story that Blacks and Jews are still willing to march together for social justice. Agencies like JCRC has criminal justice as one of their priorities. It couldn't be a better bridge issue with the state of incarceration today. So I think there's lots of opportunities. And also, I was just blown away. I've been off staff for AJC for 14 years, and I was blown away with the Unity Week between AJC and urban leagues. So when it goes to the national level and they commit to have their young leadership groups across the country continue to build bridges, I'm hopeful for the future. Plus, I think the state of intergroup relations in America has been so devastated by these 4 years that I can't imagine that there won't be all kinds of new coalitions on all of these various issues.
Yeah, when I saw in the film in particular, the intentionality to really disembody and separate the alliance of Black and Jews, I was really sad, and I do sense that some of that still lingers, and it lingers because I think part of what has happened is the recent protests has woken both sides up to really look again and pay attention and to notice. And but I don't get the sense that we have all come to the table yet. I think we're sipping our coffees and asking the question, and that we ought to come to the table. That is my sense where I live here in Connecticut, and I'm hopeful, as Sherry has said, about that, and I'm hopeful from my conversation with Rabbi Hammerman and Temple Bethel and all the work that they're doing there, Rabbi Praver, that there's certainly a willingness, and I think maybe you can give us some leadership in terms of, after I saw the film, I asked myself the question, it would be great to have the Black-Jewish Alliance be really alive, right? So both communities are aware of its presence, and for those that are, it might invite us to come together again by having an intentional outreach, because that isn't happening. This is an outreach, certainly, and this is the first, right, outside of the work that I've been doing through the church. And so I'd love to see more of that, so we can cultivate a greater alliance together.
One thing that I'll just, before we turn back over to Myra to ask the next question, one of the things I hope, perhaps Reverend Michael, you might consider showing this film at your church, doing a screening of it for your constituency. I think that's one of the biggest opportunities that we've found is, finding opportunities for unity is also related to the opportunities to be able to share about this film, which is why it's so important that that we recognize that there are opportunities and lots of opportunities available for us.
Yeah, I'll be an evangelist for this film because I think it's really important. But beyond that, at the end of the day, what happens? So we all mourn and cry and we celebrate the film, but then what, right? And if there's something folks can, if they desire to connect with, right, for greater involvement in this coalition, that would be important to me. I think I really value the film, but I want to be able to show the film and say, hey, here's an opportunity for, if this really inspired you, right? Here's a way to connect that we can reconnect the alliance of Blacks and Jews again.
Yeah.
You know, one of the important things of the film was obviously the whole civil rights movement and Dr. King, and the fact that the prophetic vision from the clergy, from the pulpit, really drove it. And you see rabbis and ministers as well as, you know, activists talking. So the powerful role of the church and the synagogue in this is just, to me, unbelievably important. And it's, you know, the film talked about Rabbi Rothschild and his relationship with Dr. King and the civil rights, you know, the dinner honoring Dr. King. But what's so powerful today is that Ebenezer Baptist Church and the Temple's current rabbi and minister, Warnick and Berg, who were in the film, have this unbelievable continuing relationship. And as soon as gun issues arise and Reverend Warnick calls Peter Berg, he's there in 30 minutes to be at a press conference. And at the Temple now, they've gotten synagogues and churches working on removing, I don't know the right names, Doug, what is it, where they're removing the records, expunging the records of non-felons. And that's a huge thing now that's traveling around Atlanta, that synagogues are taking that on, that really started as a partnership of Ebenezer Baptist Church and the Temple. So, you know, there's an example of how to respond to a really big issue of mass incarceration and gun violence.
Yes.
So, but it's amazing how much of the leadership really needs to start or has real grounding and credibility when it comes from the pulpits.
Yeah. Myra.
We have many questions rolling in, which I think speaks to the importance of this conversation, not just as an initial conversation for today or a continuing conversation, but for the real work that everyone is doing together and the continued work that is necessary. Jane writes that she worries about any racism within the Jewish community, and that she worries about anti-Semitism within segments of the Black community. So what can we do on both fronts to educate our communities and really bring them together?
Either Sherry or Reverend Michael?
My view is that there's always going to be racism in the Jewish community and anti-Semitism in the Black community. I mean, part of the human being has the potential for some percentage of our bias. I think that we have to work with those. We have to educate our folks. But I think that we have to really mostly focus on those really willing and open to be part of the movement and the work.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sherry. I think this is really points to the importance of an alliance and a space to sit at the table together and to have conversation. Both sides are party to the culture, to social media, to all the anti-Semitic voices that are out there, and all the racist voices that are out there. And sometimes some of those things might seep in consciously, implicitly, or explicitly into our own consciousness. And so a conversation, education, knowledge really begins to break down those potential walls, that we can hear each other, right? And hear each other's concern. And so it's, you know, so if you're doing something implicitly that is biased towards me as a Black man, that I can say, hey, that's painful when you say that or when you do that. And vice versa, if we're saying something that is painful to you as a Jewish person, to say that's painful, and it's, you you using it in jest or however it's done, I want you to know that's painful. And it's that conversation together that begins to break down, I believe, in part, some of the walls. But I absolutely agree. There's going to be segments on both sides that, you have Black folks that don't like being Black, so all of those different things are going to be there. But let us move so the majority of us are coming together and making a difference for all human beings,
Yeah,
whether white, Jewish, or otherwise.
No, thank you for that. I just wanted to add one additional point, and I believe it was mentioned in the question, but there's there's a small percentage of the Jewish community who are both Black and Jewish, and sort of a larger percentage that are Jews of color, however that is defined. And I believe that we need to do a much better job as a Jewish community of being inclusive of those who are both Black and Jewish, and finding opportunities to raise their voices. The study, I believe that it's something like 6% of the American Jewish community are Black Jews, and they're not necessarily represented the way that they should be. They're not involved in our communities the way that should be. Their voices are not always amplified in the way that they can be, and we as a Jewish community need to do a much better job of embracing the diversity that we have within ourselves, because that also makes it a lot easier for us in connecting with the Black community, the Black Christian community, or even the Black Muslim community, who might not be as aware of that there are even Black Jews, and that's something. And we should just differentiate, by the way. There are Black Jews, and then there are Black Hebrew Israelites who consider themselves to be part of perhaps even the original, the real Jews. I mean, there's a lot of controversy around that term in community, but a lot of the issues, we need to be doing a better job of embracing Black Jews into the work that we are doing, into the relationships that we are building. Myra. So we're going to turn it back over for, I think, I don't know, one or two last questions.
Yes,
Myra,
we have multiple questions, clearly too many questions from everyone who is watching this important conversation now. One of the things is a question about how one of the, Ambassador Andrew Young spoke in the film about how preaching in Black churches is Old Testament preaching, and asked if you can elaborate a bit upon that, because that was something that some of the audience members, we got several questions on that, did not realize truly that similarity, and that was an interesting moment for them.
Sherry, you want to go, or you would like me to take that?
Well, I sat with Andy for that interview, and I was just amazed when, first of all, Andy has very long-time relations with the Jewish community, and just totally, is moved and preaches and says the Black church preaches 70% of the time the Old Testament, and knows those stories and understands the, we were slaves in Egypt, and the Passover Seder when we sing Go Down Moses. I mean, it's so much entrenched. We've done wonderful Black Jewish Seders over the years, by the way, in Atlanta. And I remember speaking to a couple ministers about that, and they all, identified totally with what Andy Young said.
Yes, and as a Black minister, I completely agree that there is a deep connection to Old Testament, First Testament, Torah teaching regarding the Exodus, regarding slavery, regarding the Passover. So much of all of that is part of our New Testament as well. Salvation, the journey to the Promised Land, Martin's speech himself, getting to the Promised Land. All of it is really connected and deep into the Old Testament teachings and stories, and practically all of the major stories we are connected to, right? So Joseph is sold, and he's in the pit, and he goes to prison, and we can relate with all of those things. Practically all of the prophets and the suffering that happens throughout the Old Testament that Black folks are able to connect with that, and to have this sense that God will not allow our suffering to go in vain, but this journey that we're on will get us somewhere, and that He's with us. And even when it's hard and there's famine and things are challenging, that His grace is still there to keep us even through the difficult times. And so for 40 years, they're in the wilderness and their shoes doesn't wear out, and there's this resilience of the people that are there. And so we're really connected to that, and to God's presence with us in the struggle. So absolutely.
You know, Congressman Lewis is known as the conscience of Congress and for all of his civil rights work and voting rights work, but he was an ordained minister. And so, you know, I don't think people realize, I think part of his prophetic vision of justice thou shalt pursue is also, you know, grounded in his religious training as well as his sit-ins and his activism.
Yeah, what does God require of us? But to do justice and to love mercy.
Right.
Hey, that's something that really resonates with our soul, because we're crying for justice throughout the history of our time here in the Americas. And so,
and you know, the one of the things that makes the film so sacred to me is that C.T. Vivian and John Lewis both have passed away and were prominently in the film, and their stories and so much of their taped interviews Sherry Rogers has for future teaching.
We have so many more questions. One of the questions that we have received by multiple people also is for people who were unable to watch this important film. They are asking how to do so. So we want to share the website to be able to purchase the tickets for those people who have not, and that's www.stamford, S-T-A-M like Mary, F-O-R-D, jcc.org/film festival. Again, that's StamfordJCC/film festival, and you can purchase the ticket to watch this film until later tonight. So we want to definitely be sure that we are sharing that information so that people can continue to educate themselves, their families, and friends about this important legacy and work together. Dov, do you want to make some concluding remarks, and then we'll do some closing moments?
Oh, I get concluding remarks? Oh, that's so exciting. Well, look, I'm very excited to be able to be a part of this conversation today with Sherry and Reverend Michael. I think, you know, one of the things for American Jewish Committee that's so important is to demonstrate and show and find opportunities for connection, relationship building, and advocacy. And I hope that, and I know that this is sort of a wonderful opportunity in moving forward with AJC's Westchester Fairfield office. And if there were questions that weren't answered, I hope that you'll reach out to my colleagues there who will be able to answer some of those for you. But I would like to thank Sherry and Reverend Michael for taking this time in the middle of their Sundays to be with all of you and for all of us to be together. So, and for myself, thank you for having me join you from Atlanta, because it's and I'll say that on behalf of Sherry also.
Thank you all. Thank you to Sherry Rogers for this incredible film, Mort Lowenthal, Reverend Dr. Michael Christie, Sherry Frank, and Dov Wilker for this truly important and timely conversation. Thank you especially for continuing our community's work together, of which we at AJC are proud to be a partner and a leader. And we thank our audience for joining us this afternoon, because we truly cannot do this work alone, but we can only do it if we link arms together and, as Rabbi Heschel said, preach with our feet. If you enjoyed this program, we ask that you join us at two important upcoming AJC Westchester Fairfield programs. Next, in 2 weeks, Sunday, November 15th at noon, we will have the AJC Westchester Fairfield sponsored film and discussion for Crescendo, which focuses on Israeli-Palestinian issues. And especially on Thursday, November 19th at 8:30 in the morning for the AJC Westchester Fairfield led Thanksgiving Diversity Breakfast, which will be virtual this year. This is truly a continuation of this work that we are all doing together. and welcome everyone's participation in doing so. In addition, AJC Westchester Fairfield is launching a community of conscience, and we invite everyone in the community to join us as part of this work together. For anyone who would like more information, please send an email to us at westchester@ajc.org, and we will be sure to respond to you and invite you into all of this work together. Thank you on behalf of us to everyone who participated in this conversation, and we look forward to joining you in the future. Have a good afternoon, stay safe, and stay healthy. Thank you.